Hi, everybody, and welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. I see some familiar faces in the webinar, some new faces in the webinar. Um, as you can see in front of you, we've got some links to our socials. You're always able to reach out to us through those socials or to me directly, and I'll be sharing my email with you at the end of this webinar. Um, for those of you that don't know, PASconcept is a web-based application. It's an all-inclusive web-based application that allows you to manage the full life cycle of your project, everything from the moment that you um, meet your client all the way through to project completion, and sometimes even beyond that. Today, our focus is going to be primarily on project management. Now, some might say that project management begins when the project starts. In fact, in PASconcept, there are a few things that you could do before you get to that point, but we'll get into that. So beyond being a web-based software, we also have two mobile applications, one for iOS and one for Android, where a large part of the elements that you could do from within PASconcept can be done from your mobile device, from the comfort of your mobile device, wherever you might have it. So this is what we consider to be the full life cycle of a project. And for those of you that attended the previous seminars, you know that we covered the full life cycle. Last time we went a little bit in depth into the proposal writing portion and proposal management portion of PASconcept. Today we'll be doing something similar, but still a little different. The proposal portion really is encompassed and encased within the proposal writing element of PASconcept, whereas project management sort of spills beyond that a little bit. We'll be touching a couple different modules as we go. But just to familiarize and refresh the idea of the project life cycle, I'll go ahead and cover it here. From the minute that you meet your client, you'll be able to get their information, or rather, before you even know they'll be your client, when they're just a potential lead, you'll be able to populate their information into PASconcept, tag it, track it, add additional information. If by chance with this individual, you're able to see the possibility of doing work with them, well, then they can blossom into an opportunity. An opportunity is an entity in PASconcept where you can begin to track sort of some of the important elements of a project, a potential future project, if you will. Here, you'd be able to enter if, for example, the client has a budget in mind, if they have services in mind or specific tasks in mind, you can track that there. More importantly, that area is primarily meant for the tracking of communication with that client. Anything from emails to meetings to phone calls can be tracked there so that you can ensure that you keep the embers hot of any opportunity and don't let any of them fall through the cracks. Once you have enough information and you feel that you have the ability to convert that into a proposal, that's done in just a couple clicks. Alternatively, a proposal can be made from scratch without having to go through the opportunity. This is one of the dynamic and flexible elements of PASconcept that allow it to be so accommodating to a wide scope of different company types. In fact, today we'll be going over a number of things as far as project tracking goes or project management goes that are, for the most part, optional. You can track as much or as little as you'd like to track in regards to perhaps the project type or the scope of the project. We understand that much like all businesses aren't the same, not all projects are the same. Not all of them need the same in-depth level of detail. And PASconcept allows you to accommodate for that. We'll get into what that means once we start getting into the nitty-gritty of the actual project management area elements. But like I was saying, once an opportunity blossoms to the point of it being a proposal can be written and of course sent to your client, accepted, so on and so forth. But something really curious is that with PASconcept, you can even begin the project management portion from the proposal itself. Now I'm going to go ahead and dive into PASconcept and show you how we do that and what I mean by that. Before I dive in, just to express some general concepts. When you have a proposal in PASconcept, it's traditionally composed of a series of tasks and phases, or in some cases, just tasks with not a direct need for phases. But each task typically comes with a either an hourly rate or a flat rate associated to it. This is how the proposal itself populates a total amount that can be distributed over the payment terms or simply just totaled for the client themselves. But at this step, there's something particularly interesting. You can actually estimate certain elements of a project. So here I've come into PASconcept. Those of you that have seen the webinar before, and in fact, those of you that use PASconcept on a regular basis are probably very familiar with this screen. It's your traditional login screen. When you first log in, you see this page. Users, of course, have the ability to go to a different page. For example, if you yourself are a project manager, you may feel more comfortable landing directly on the jobs list, and that's certainly something that PASconcept can accommodate to. But for our purposes today, we're going to be hopping into the proposals first. So here, I'm going to show you an example of a proposal let's hop into the proposal wizard, that already has the initial makings of project tracking or project management. So here is a very standard portion of a proposal, which is specifically relating to the fees and scope, where we see that this proposal indeed has a series of tasks associated to it. Well, we see pretty traditional things. We see a rate, we see a total, but you'll notice that there's an area that's called estimated hours and estimated value. This is particularly interesting because when you go into the task itself, you'll notice at the bottom of the screen, there's an area called Task Estimator. Now, again, this is entirely optional. This is for those that have the flexibility or the manpower to be able to begin the estimation process on time consumption relating to a project at this stage. Typically, this falls to both large companies and smaller companies. Really, it's dependent more so on the type of work being done. If the project merits this level of detail at this stage, you have the ability to do it. There's no need to wait until the client has accepted the project to be able to determine these values. Not to mention, it also informs the person writing the proposal as to what prices may be the adequate ones to associate to any one of these tasks. This process is actually pretty straightforward. The first thing is to understand the task itself and to understand the resources necessary to execute this task. In this case, we have a task that, according to this, requires a project engineer, a drafter, and a project coordinator. In all cases, we've got the project engineer. We assume they'll probably take about 3 hours on this task, the drafter about 5, and the project coordinator about 2. There are a couple things that this does, which is exceedingly helpful. The first, and more relevant to the proposal itself, is ensuring a kind of estimate for billing as far as for this task for this proposal. It lets us know, hey, the price you should be charging based on your company's overhead and everything should be about $655. This is in line with the standards of your company. And so you can replicate that at the task level. But more importantly, and more to the point when it comes to project management, we already have a subset of hours that can be distributed by a project manager. This incredibly simplifies the process that the project manager has to go through to distribute their hours. Not only is it already pre-built, once the project starts, this information is automatically inherited, but there's no guesswork. You know that these hours are supported by the budget provided by the project. This makes things way easier further down the line, but again, it's entirely optional. This could come with no estimator whatsoever, and we'll still be able to do the full gamut of project management once we get to the job level. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you the next big thing that you can inherit from the proposal to the job. So once we go back, a part of project tracking and project management is, of course, invoice management. We won't go too deep into that, but just suffice it to say that when a project is accepted, it inherits, a PASconcept will automatically generate that job and generate all of its subsequent invoices. However, in the same way, it will also inherit all of these estimates. So let me go ahead and accept this proposal, shall we? So I'm going to go back to the list. As an administrator for this company, I have the power to bypass the signing process and simply accept it. This could be in a scenario where the client has verbally authorized the project to move forward, or for whatever reason you have a certain type of handshake agreement with this client. This is all permissible within these bounds as per the specifications of each company. Some companies will allow this type of modification, others won't, and that's perfectly fine. So let's hop into this project and accept it. Once it's accepted, we'll be able to see it in the job section automatically. So here, I'm going to go ahead and mark this as accepted and update the status. What's occurred in just a click of a button in a fraction of a second is that this project has already been generated as a job, and all of the various intricate pieces of information have been populated as elements of that job. So let's go check it out, shall we? We could do that in one of two ways. We can navigate to the job menu, or we can see that here there's a column called job, which has the corresponding job information. This will take us directly to the edit view of the job. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the menu. So you can see the full menu, see it appear on the menu, on the table, and then we'll hop into the actual job itself. So here, let's go ahead and filter here. We'll go to all statuses. Perfect. And then we'll refilter. Perfect. So here we have our new job. Immediately, you can see a couple of interesting things. One, we are notified, hey, there's no project manager associated to this job. You should probably do that. It's a very important part of most jobs. Additionally, you can see some additional information. You've got 0% of the budget has been used so far. Nothing has been collected. The entire balance of the project is still open. And so we could rectify a couple of these things. Had this gone through the traditional means, or had I set up the proposal to have the invoice be sent out automatically when the project is launched, we would have already had that first invoice be billed. So let's hop into this specific example. So the first couple things you'll notice is that you have your job detail. Here, you can start to populate, or a project manager can start to populate some of the more intricate elements of a job. Little things like the total lifespan, the square footage of the project as a whole, collecting these individual data points. If they're entered at the proposal level, great, they'll be inherited here. Otherwise, they can be done from this view rather easily. One of the other elements that we've recently added to PASconcept is the ability to collect automatically property information. That is to say, I'll show you. Here we have a property detail tab. In this property detail tab, we've got the address. We have the luxury of being connected to a subset of different data providers. These data providers are able to, just relating to one specific address, be able to return a subset of information. I'll show you what that looks like inside PASconcept right now. So here we have the address. Here we have the Fetch Property Data button. You'd be able to click it. Oh, it's found the address. We're going to go ahead and fetch the data. Perfect. It's been found. And now we're going to go ahead and apply it. So you'll notice right away, we see some additional information. We've got our latitude and longitude has been added, geocoding accuracies, census tract, but perhaps even more exciting than that, we've got our boundary coordinates for the property. We've got some structural information, whatever has been able to be collected and populated, including the year the property was built, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, the total square footage. We've got land parcel information as well. We've got the legal description portion of the property. We even have the owner's information and address. So this information is really helpful, especially if, say, for example, you're submitting forms to the city or submitting permits. This information can be populated onto those forms. Now, as far as the true project management portion of it, we'll really start to see that in the scope tab. Now, I've mentioned it before, and I'll mention it again. Almost every entity in PASconcept is kind of like its own little binder. So whether it's an opportunity, whether it's a proposal, or whether it's a job, each one of those is subdivided into a series of different tabs where you can find relevant information to that specific tab. For example, in job info, as you saw, we've got information on the job and its subsequent elements like the property, the financial detail, that type of thing. In scope, we get to see the full scope. You'll notice all of these are the same tasks that we saw previously on the proposal. They've been automatically populated and are ready to be sort of modified or adjusted by the project manager or administrator or what have you. And again, it could be as light or as in-depth as you'd like. The next step, of course, being sort of gauging out either the timetable of the project or assigning a group of employees to work on this project. Like I said, both can be of varying degrees of detail, and it's all depending on what is right for your company and for this project. Among those are the following. You can define an overarching date for this project. Say, for example, the project starts today and should be turned into the client in a month's time. Perfect. That would put it at March 22. In fact, falls on a Tuesday as well. You can then subsequently apply this same date range of start and completion to all of the items below it. This is really helpful for jobs that don't have phases, but also for phases within jobs that do have them. For example, say you had a job that had 3 different phases. If phase 1 had a duration of a month or an estimated duration of a month, but phase 1 also has 5, 6, 7 different tasks within it, you'd be able to say, okay, phase 1 starts today and ends in a month, and I want all the subsequent tasks within this phase to be done or completed within that same time frame. You would do the same thing, and it would be applied to everything within that phase, just as the step I'm about to do now will apply it to everything within that job. It all depends on what level of the tree you want to apply this range. So let's go ahead and do so. So immediately you'll see that the planned and end date has been applied for each one of these. Now, realistically, if we have a month to do all of these items, I, as a project manager, may not want this very broad, very large date range for all of my individual tasks. I know that some of these tasks have dependencies where they might need a previous task to be completed before this new task can start. I'm being told in the chat, just to let you know, these messages are going to everyone and not just the hosts. If you do have any questions, by all means, yes, ask them in the chat. We've got a group of people here who are tending to those chats as well. So if you have any questions, they'll be answered directly there. You could do so either entering it into the chat or entering it into the question and answer area of this webinar. We've got a lot to cover, so I may not go to each one of the questions, but please, I will make every effort to either, whether it's in the middle of the webinar or at the very end of the webinar, try to tend to as many questions as possible. Thank you. So moving forward, me as a project manager, I may not be interested in having such a broad spectrum for every single task. I may want to go into each task and assign a specific ideal date range for the start and end date. Absolutely, that can be done too. Say, for example, this program, I want it done within the first 3 days. Perfect. That's our first date. We've got our starting date of 2/22, which means that we should be ending right around Thursday. Let's give them until Friday. Perfect. And now that date range has been applied here. You'll see the 22nd to the 25th. Now this is just for, let's say, overarching job tracking, right? I want to make sure that it's in line with my goals. I know to be within the constraints of my timetable, I want to have this item done by the 25th. The reason why this is important is because then you can also view it in a Gantt chart. We'll get to that in another example that I have here. But the next item would be, okay, great. So we have, we're starting from the outside in, right? We're looking at it from completely outside the project and drilling down into its specific pieces. First of which is breaking it apart into smaller chunks and adding those timetables to those individual chunks. The next big step would be, all right, well, who's my team? Who's working on this project? How do they know that they're working on this project so that they can then access this and see what my expectations are for this project? Well, that's rather simple. You'd click on the Employees tab. Here, you can add and assign employees to different tasks or jobs. So let's go ahead and add an employee. Here, I'm going to be adding, let's see, I'm going to be adding someone to the first task program, right? Before we select a task, I do want to show you this area to the right. This gives me a world of information. Now it's dynamic, so the more information I provide it on the left, the more in-depth and drilled down information I'm going to see on the right. I'll give you an example. I know that the whole of this job was estimated with 104 hours in mind. However, if I select a task, I know that this task, regardless of how many people I assign to it, has been estimated to have 10 hours of work. Once I select a position, for example, let's say a drafter, I know that this selected position over the course of this entire job has 47 hours in theory that have been estimated. Once I select an employee, which let me go ahead and open it up to all departments, and say, for example, I wanted to choose Joaquin here. I know that this employee has 0 hours of workload for this specific type of work. So that's one of the other areas in which this really is helpful. You'll notice when I dropped this box down, it wasn't just a clear employee selection table. It was a full table with additional information that is providing me with additional insight in my being able to select an employee or the right person for the job. Once I open this up, I see a couple of things. I see what the quantity of work is that any one of these employees already has assigned to them. You'll notice Joaquin at the top has 0 hours. They have nothing assigned to them as of yet. Paula has 10 hours ahead of them. That means if they only worked on the things that they were assigned, they would in theory be complete within those 10 hours or should be complete within those 10 hours. But then you have drastically other things. Oh, it looks like Michael Carter, or actually even a better example, George M., who has 1,000 or so hours already assigned to him over a series of different projects. I know this guy's got a lot on his plate already. He's working on 28 different jobs, but he's also probably one of the more qualified folks to work on this type of task. I can tell that he's got over 62 hours of experience with this task type specifically. So it really does allow me to make these optimizing choices right out the gate. And let's say we do choose George M. So here we've chosen as the drafter. We see additional information. We see the hours associated to it. I know that this task has a lot of 10 hours. So perhaps in the case of the drafter, I'd only want to assign them to 3 hours of it. And then I can simply add employee or add employee and go back. If I add employee, I can still select a different subset and add it to this list. So let's go ahead and add employee and go back. Here we get our first employee being signed up in this area. If I wanted to add a different employee or an additional employee, I would simply go into this area. If I wanted to select an employee and assign them as the project manager, for example, this project was estimated with a project coordinator in mind. Let's go ahead and select the same task. Let's open this up to all departments and let's select, let's say, Herme. Here, we're going to have them work as the project coordinator for this specific task, and I'm going to assign him 8 hours. Previously, as you can see, oh, it looks like we have 7 of the 10 hours already or rather pending. So we know had I assigned them the 8 hours, I would have gone above what the estimated amount of time would be for this specific job. Here I know I've got 7 hours left of a total estimated 10 hours for this job. I'll go ahead and give him those 7 hours. And I'll mark him as the project manager. We'll add employee and we'll go back. Now, rather than going through this entire project and populating that information, I have a replica project of this same project that already has all the richness of information already populated therein. But as you can see, he's listed here as the project manager. And if we exit the job, we'll find that he is listed as the project manager for this project. Now look at the project below it. The project below it is one that's already in progress. We can tell quite a bit of information about it. The first is we've already consumed 17% of the budget, coming out to a whopping $1,122 of this budget. Now, as far as billing, we've invoiced $2,180, of which all of it has been paid. But that $2,180 only represents 30% of this project. I'll go into a little bit more detail as to what that means when we hop into this project. But also I want to bring your attention to the sub-consultant fees. This allows us to know approximately how much we've allotted towards sub-consultant fees for this one specific project. Now let's hop into this project, shall we? So as we mentioned before, we have these various tabs. In this case, we're going to hop into the scope. Like I said, it's a replica of the other existing project, but I've fully populated it just before this meeting. It literally took me all of 15 minutes to populate all of the employees and all of their hours and assign them to the different tasks. And that's the level of efficiency that this program allows you to have. Here we have all the hours assigned to each individual task. We have a planned start date and end date. And it looks as though this first project has already been started. In fact, it's 93% complete with an approximate end date of 3/1, which puts us right in line with our planned end date. You'll notice at the very top, this whole row, which reflects the project as a whole, allows you to really see the full roll-up of the project. Of the total of 105 hours that have been assigned, 10 of them have been completed. And it looks like of the overall progress of the project, 12% has been completed. I know as the project administrator that this means we are in line for an on-time or perhaps even early delivery for the client. Almost never heard of, but it can happen. The other view of this specific table, now granted, what I'm about to show you is literally just reflecting what's on this table, is the Gantt view. The Gantt view allows us to see the same information, but in a timeline. So let's go ahead and hop over to the Gantt view. And here we go, the exact same information in table format. Any one of these items could be started today. There's not a dependency between one and the other. So if it does, that time would be tracked accordingly. It looks as though this project has already got quite a bit of advancement at 93%. This is the item that was at 93% total. We see the progress as we go. We can hide the planned start and end date. If, say, for example, as an administrator, that's not an element that you want to reveal to your employees, say a projected start date of a task that's far into the future, in so much as you may want to have them start earlier than your planned start date. But the same is true in the inverse. This will tell you if you're behind on a project. If you're behind on a project, and I'll show you what that looks like, you'll see a red line instead of a blue one. This lets you know as the project manager that these items need to be tended to with urgency. Beyond that, it also will let you know if on these items that are delayed, you were to start today, if full force and dedication was placed on this item, it also shows you what is the soonest you'd be able to complete it based on the earlier estimations. So that said, let's hop over to expenses, as I mentioned before, with the sub-consultants. Here, it looks as it looks as though this project has Jack Sparks as an MEP. Uh, they're charging us $500, and in fact, we've already paid them 250. You can see here that payment was made as a check just today. And you can track to see how much you still have due for these individuals. Additionally, you can download a full expense report of the project as a whole. Beyond that, in the billing section, you'd be able to track a very key part of a project, all the invoicing. In this case, let me go ahead and open this up to all invoices. In this case, it looks as though one invoice was already sent, received by the client and paid by check, and they paid the full amount. Now, I mentioned these two elements. It's not traditionally part of, let's say, um, hard project management being primarily the resources allotted within the project that your company will be utilizing for the completion of that project. These are more financially based, but they do encompass a large amount of the information that's collected in regards to your project. In many of our clients, those who are small to mid-sized businesses, oftentimes it's the same people who are managing the project that are managing the financial elements of that project, whether that be from an administrator, from an admin basis, or if it's simply because the personnel is limited to that capacity and they're sort of providing that assistance in short for these individual projects. But switching gears and going back to the project management, you'll notice one of the key elements is sort of observing the budget. Uh, I also want to make a brief mention. We've mentioned this before in our other webinars, but for those new faces, this view is a view that I have as an administrator in this mock company. It's a mock company. None of this information is real. These are not real projects, but um, it is a representation of what you might find when you utilize the system. So you'll notice here I have hard numbers. I've got down to the dollar detail of what my budget consumption is at any given point in time. I can hide this. I can hide it and I can show it just as percentages. If I were to have a meeting with an employee who I didn't necessarily want to make privy of the financial allotments associated to any one specific project, I can easily hide it and just show percentages. Oh, in this project, we've collected 30% of the budget of the fee, but we've utilized 17% of the budget. I do want to go into a little bit of detail as to how we calculate that amount. Now, in other softwares, you'll find that the budget is tracked utilizing the time entered on a project. And this is well and good and totally understandable and a big part of how you track budgets. However, in observing different companies and observing the way they work and how best to consider budget consumption, we've stumbled across something that's a little bit more powerful in that degree. We have something that's called the company multiplier. The company multiplier essentially allows for, as your employees start to enter time, as that time is associated to projects, not only do we reduce the budget by, say, for example, their salary or whatever you pay them, but in addition to that, we take additional consideration to adjust for your overhead, to adjust for any potential tax liabilities that you might have for those employees. We allot for the employees that are not directly working on the project, so your administrators, your front desk, people who don't interact directly with a project, whose salary isn't directly supported by the budget of a project. We take those elements into consideration. And the way that we do that, like I said, is through the company multiplier. I'm going to navigate you over to that page so that you could take a look at it. Again, it broaches one of those elements which is more, let's say, financially driven than it is hard project management. But it's important to know how these elements work, how those gears turn, so that you can best manage your resources, which at its heart is what project management is. Ensuring that elements are delivered to your clients in a timely and in a cost efficient manner for you. And this plays a big part in that. So let's go ahead and hop over to the company profile for this fake company. And you'll see that, oh, sorry, not the company profile, the company multiplier for this company. And you'll quickly see a sort of breakdown of what we mean by the considerations put aside for the overhead and other expenses. The first thing that you'll notice is we have the total salary cost, if you will, for the company on behalf of those employees. The next is taking into consideration what the tax implications of those employees are. Now, PASconcept is exceedingly flexible in that capacity in that we do serve the entire United States, and as such, taxes can be different from state to state. Some states consider a local employee tax, others just a state tax, others defer to like a national state tax or what have you. And we allow for that adjustment and those changes over different states, different counties, so on and so forth. So here you're able to enter what that value is to determine what your liability is for your full employee gamut. Now, this is true not just on a general basis, but can really be true employee to employee. For example, if you have an employee who is part-time and perhaps that falls into a different tax bracket, that's perfectly fine. PASconcept allows you to make those type of concessions on an employee to employee basis. The other element is in regards to the productive salary. Now, a lot of people kind of squint their eyes or turn their heads at the concept of productive and non-productive employees. I assure you, if you have an employee in your ranks, there's a pretty good chance they're all relatively productive. What we refer to when we say productive and non-productive employees are those whose salary is directly supported by the budget of a project. These are the individuals that work directly on a project. It's entirely possible that the person working at your front desk may not be drafting. In fact, there's a very high likelihood that the person who's working the front desk or managing accounting or is an administrator may not be directly working on projects, and as such, they're considered non-productive. They're not producing, if you will. They're not producing work for those individual projects, and that's what we take into consideration because their hours will never be entered against a project. So we take that into consideration. We take a rough estimate of what you anticipate to be your sub-consultant fees over the course of a year. Your rent costs, any other additional fees that you might have, and we totalize what your expenses will be for that year. We then also take into consideration what you'd like your desired profit margin to be. This way, we kind of bake it into your projects so that if you have reached full budget consumption, you know that within that budget consumption, you've already had your 10% set aside if 10% is what your desired profit margin is. This really gives you a little bit more flexibility and a lot more insight as to how best to manage your projects and how best to distribute your resources in regards to any one specific project. Not to mention, you can always go to this page and see exactly what your target income is and what your actual income is to see how close in line you are at any given point throughout the year. In fact, this fake company is only about 1% acquired their target income, which might even at this early in the game be able to be something that you can identify as something that needs to be rectified pretty quickly. We've certainly gone through more than 1% of the year so far. So beyond that, now that you have kind of like this better idea of what that is, we'll show you, going back to the jobs, what time entry is like on any one of these jobs. So let's hop back into the Smith residence. Like I mentioned before, here we have the scope, which gives you the full gamut, the full range of those individual tasks on a timetable, the assigned hours. But then you'll notice right next to it, there is a column called executed hours. Executed hours are the hours that have been entered on behalf of those employees that ascribe directly to that task or that job. So here, let's go ahead and go to our employees list. If an employee has access to this list, they can easily click here and enter their time. If not, they can do so by visiting the timetable. So here we'll go ahead and go over to this view. So we have a time entry section and there's a time entry page where an employee can see all of the jobs that they're assigned to and how many hours they've been assigned to that specific job. So let's go ahead and enter here. Now, I know that in this other job, we had an employee by the name of John Doe, who was working as the project engineer for even that job that we were just looking at. So let's go ahead and pull him up. I, as the administrator, have the advantage of being able to pull up anyone's timetable page. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for John Doe. The page will automatically refresh. And here we see the Smith residence, that job that we were just looking at. It looks as though John has been assigned 14 hours, and of those 14 hours, he's executed 3. This gives John a lot of information. It lets him know that, well, we have this project that has a final due date of 4/22. It has the client's name, it's got the project name, it's got even this link to go to the project detail page, and it's got this other link for entering time. Additionally, it lets him know, hey, Edme is the project manager for this project. So let's go ahead and see what that process is like for entering time. He would simply click there. It already has the job selected. It's always going to show the current date. Say, for example, it would be he's entering time for another previous date. He could do so here. Let's go ahead and yes, we're gonna continue working on the program. Let's say he's adding 1 hour to this. He has the option of selecting a category under which he'd like that time to be considered, entering a note, for example, and then adding that time. In this case, it's mandatory for this specific job that a category be selected. And then we add time. Now, keep in mind, those categories are customized per company. You populate what those categories are in the same way that you populate the tasks for your company, the proposals, proposal templates, the phases. All of that is pre-populated within catalogs that allow your employees to select from a list that you've defined, allowing you and giving you the ability to track as much or as little as you'd like. Just to give you an example of what I mean by as much or as little, we spent I spent all of maybe 15 minutes dedicating time to allotting or assigning employees specific tasks. There's nothing in PASconcept that says that I have to do that. I do it because I like to have that level of detail. At the end of the year, I want to know how many hours my company spent on one specific task type. So let's say if we go back here to jobs, we can go ahead and go back to the Smith's residence. I want to be able to have this richness of information because, well, I'm a data nerd, and some people out there are data nerds too, and I think that's great. And maybe this is something that can help your company. Say, for example, at the end of the year, I want to know for zoning summary. I want to know how many hours I spent doing zoning summaries throughout the entire year. But I also want to contrast that with the amount that I estimated to do on zoning summaries. It could be that without that perspective, without that point of view, I would have no way of knowing that maybe my estimations are a bit off. Maybe I'm assuming that zoning summary is something that I do much more efficiently, but quite frankly, takes me double or triple the time. I would have no way of making that observance without adding this level of detail. Now, that said, there are some companies for which that level of information is arbitrary or is no longer necessary or wasn't necessary to begin with. And that's perfectly fine too. I could very easily assign 5 different employees to this task and this task alone, generally speaking, and just have them enter time against this job as a whole. And not worry about assigning them a specific fraction of an hour within a task, but I have the luxury to do that if I so choose. And that's part of what makes PASconcept such a powerful project management tool. It is as rich as the data that you want to put into it. If you want to keep that at a very surface level because you want to keep yourself lean and dynamic and spend as little time interfacing with something like this, that's perfectly fine. You have that ability, and the information will be nearly just as rich for doing so. You'll still have a lot of the basic information, which includes project information like budget consumption, and just knowing the general parameters of, well, I assigned 100 hours split between 5 different employees, and they've taken 150. I know that there's something wrong there, and I, as an administrator, can hop in and say, hey, there's something up. Or I've assigned 100 hours and they've consumed 75 hours of it, but the progress of the work has only advanced 12%. There's something wrong here. The biggest part, and again, I say this completely frank and open, the biggest part of project management is trying to be able to catch issues as early as you can. This is imperative. The last thing you want is to be slowly creeping up on a project deadline or slowly creeping up on the full consumption of a budget, and only at that point be made aware of an issue that could have been corrected weeks before. With something like PASconcept, you have the ability to observe these things gradually over time and be able to identify these issues long before they become irreparable, or long before they become significantly more costly than they otherwise would have been. And like I said, some of these issues may simply be, oh, we're taking a lot longer. Perhaps the estimation process wasn't great, or we didn't take something into account in when we sent the proposal over. Oh, that's my alarm. Guys, I'd love to let you guys know it is right now 2:22 on 2/22 of 22. That is to say, today, Tuesday, the 22nd of February. It is now 2:22. Thank you guys for being a part of this presentation. I really appreciate it. I think thank you guys for sharing this relatively historic moment. I'm not sure when we'll have one of these again. So thank you again. And yeah, so back to the point. Project management is all about that. It's all about making sure that you're making effective use of your resources and that you're able to strategically put yourself in a position where you can adjust to the oncoming needs of a project. And to do so means that you have to make informed decisions, and to make informed decisions, you have to be informed. And being informed is way easier with something like PASconcept, wherein you can enter that information and continue. Now, the other portion that we haven't spoken about yet is communication. Communication can take many forms. Just because the project manager has all of these things in mind and is able to see, oh gosh, yes, I assigned 11 hours, I have this date range. This in no way takes the place of communication with your team. But we do help make that communication with your team that much easier. And we do that in various ways. One of the ways that we do that is through the notes section. Notes works as a messaging board. It allows any individual to post something and for others to respond to it. It stays here, it stays associated to the job so that at any point in time in the future, it can be referred to. We also have activities. As I mentioned before, activities are phone calls, emails, meetings. These can be with external parties or simply internal. And it makes the planning of these things much smoother. For example, in this case, it looks like this company has a series of things that are pretty common for all projects. They have an activity to confirm client information. They have an activity which is like a project launch meeting where everyone can meet and discuss the scope of the project. And it looks like this client has requested that an email be sent to them on the 11th with a status update. Perfect. These things can be entered individually one by one. In fact, I would assume that this email one has been entered manually one at a time. But the other two can be true as a default for all projects. And the reason why I say that is because we have sequences of activities and we have activities. If I wanted to add a single one-off activity, I could easily do so here. And say, for example, it's a phone call and I'm sending it to John Smith, one of the employees of this company. Client called requesting to speak with you. And then here I can add any additional information if I wanted to. Client is expecting a call back 3 p.m. Tomorrow. Perfect. Then I can also adjust the date to be for 3 p.m. the following day. Here we go, 3 p.m. And I can add that activity. This will automatically notify John, let him know, hey, just to let you know, this is, it sent him an email, let him know, hey, the client called, they want to speak with you, and there's a history of that in the system. The other way that you can add phone calls, emails, activities, anything to that capacity is by adding a sequence. At the beginning of many projects, many companies have a protocol of actionable items that need to be executed before the project can truly start. That might include a phone call with the client. It might include a project launch meeting. Those can be set up very quickly here. For example, project type A, I know that this is a series of 3 activities that all should be done at a certain key point or trigger in the life cycle of a project. I would simply select this sequence, which I know takes 3 activities that I've pre-programmed into the system, pre-set up essentially. And then I add the sequence and all of those are added. And this can be for one or many of the people associated to the project, for project managers, for even direct employees who may not be associated directly to the project yet, but may serve in an administrative capacity. Everyone in that click of a button has been notified of these additional activities associated to a project, which ensures clarity of conversation, clarity of information, clarity of objective for the project, and makes the actual maintenance of the project a lot smoother. I want to be respectful of your time. I know we've gotten to about 2:27. We wanted to keep this at an hour. If anyone's got any questions, by all means, feel free to drop them in that question and answer area. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. We've got just a couple minutes left. I also wanted to hop over to this view. If by chance you guys have any questions beyond this, things you may not want to ask in the webinar, you're more than welcome to shoot me an email, reach out to me directly. I check my email all day long and oftentimes all night long too. Now we have someone asking if the company multiplier comes as a default or do you personalize it to the company? Excellent question. A little bit of a trick question actually, because each company has the ability to define it on their own. It's not something that you're dependent on us to do. You can do that on your own. And yes, absolutely, it's always customized per company. Your salary amount may be different than the different companies. Obviously, it's going to be 99% of the time, it's going to be different. The expenses that you incur are going to be different. Oh, hi, Tiffany. We've got Tiffany asking if we can review the sequence again. Absolutely, Tiffany, not a problem at all. Let's hop back over here. So here, let's hop out of the job. So in our company section, we have this section. So if you click on your cog and you go to company and you go to activity sequence templates, you can click here. And essentially you have the ability to create a sequence, right? So here are the 2 sequences that are associated to jobs, but sequences can be associated to different subsets of PASconcept. Those are the 2 that you saw, the new project type A, new project type B, both are job related. And here in new project type B, for example, as you see, I've clicked here, you can see it in detail underneath. We know that the subject is going to be a launch meeting. The activity is going to be, the activity type is a meeting. From the day of adding the sequence, it puts it as due in 1 day, which is how we define it. If these are things that occur in sequence, we know that, say, t minus 0 would be today, t plus 1 would be tomorrow, so on and so forth. And the description would be populated with whatever you have here. And of course, if it's a physical meeting, the location would be relevant and you would have it here. And all of those can be adjusted, manipulated, modified as necessary by each company. So we have another anonymous attendee asking, can I track the budget that has been used in a project? Yes, you can view that either generally, or you can go a little bit more in depth by going into the project itself. I'll show you a little bit of what I mean by that. So let's go ahead and go to jobs. Hopefully that answered your question, Tiffany. If not, I'm more than happy to have a secondary session where we talk about it. Just reach out and we'll be more than happy to meet, and I can see how best it would apply for your company specifically. We've got quite a number of questions coming in. Perfect. So let's go ahead and take a look at the budget. So budget, of course, like I mentioned, you could view it here from a 30,000 foot range, but you can also see the time entries per each individual. While this doesn't give you a financial element to the project itself, it does show you how many hours each individual has entered for one specific project. It also allows you to see it per task. Beyond that, if you wanted to go to your expense report, you'd be able to see what the total value of your employees' time has been and how that relates to the total percentage of use of your budget as a whole. So, all right. Hopefully that answers your question. And again, in all of these scenarios, if you want me to dive deeper, I know that our time is limited and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. If for whatever reason you want to have a session where we go a little bit more in depth into any one of these items, where you want to see how any one of these can specifically relate to your company, I'm more than happy to set up a session with you, either myself or Paula, or any of the wonderful people here at PASconcept would be more than happy to sit with you and just go a little bit more in depth onto these items and see how best we could solve these or adapt these for your company specifically. So let's see, we had that we spoke about the multiplier. The only people who are assigned to a project are able to see the project? No. In fact, you can have that setting per employee. For example, I myself am an administrator in this company. I'm probably not going to be assigned to any of these projects, but I should still have the ability to see all of these projects, and I have that ability. On a per employee, a per user basis, you can define if that person can see only their projects or if they can see all projects. This obviously can vary from company to company, but having that flexibility inherent within the system, we always feel is absolutely key. Like I said, for various reasons, this industry, every company is a little different. Every company wants to manage things a little different. And that's part of the beauty of what makes this sector as rich as it is. And we want to respect that with our system, and we want to make sure that it's as flexible and as dynamic as can be or as should be necessary for everyone. Now let's take a look. Do we have any other questions? Can I represent the projects on a map? Yes. So while not directly project management per se, but a really good representation of perhaps if you spend a lot of time visiting individual projects physically in a physical world, you'd be able to see. So let's go ahead and put, let's say all years search. This will show us a larger subset of the projects. And I can now click on this little geopositioning item and see the projects on this type of map. and you could actually zoom in to see where they are in relation to each other. Beyond that, there's also a Google Street View associated to it. It's a nice, helpful little element. It can be used for multiple things. It can be used for project management, but could also be used for marketing as a whole to ensure that you know what regions you are, let's say, hottest in. Another question we have here. Have you all considered a timer per job? I start working, click clock, start, stop. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, we have. In fact, we are planning for at the end of this quarter to have a revamped version of the time entry portal, which is a little different. It's a little bit more of a traditional timesheet. We've noticed the transition into PASconcept is a lot smoother when people are seeing more familiar things, which is why at the very top of every project, we try and populate as much of PASconcept as possible with familiar information or pre-existing projects of the company and things of this nature, when, if at all possible. But one of the things that people have been pretty familiar with up until this point, specifically in this sector, is a timesheet. However, even that's got its flaws. People are comfortable with it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best option. As part of that development, we're including a sort of start-stop clock where one can select both the project and the task, click a button, and then the timer will start and stop accordingly. And you can, of course, make modifications onto that and then submit it as part of your time as well, making things a lot smoother for, I think, everyone involved. Especially for those individuals who primarily their interaction with PASconcept is entering time. This should be something that keeps it pretty tight in that capacity and allows it to add an additional feature that they can take advantage of. So let's see. I think those are. Oh, what is Microsoft Azure? Sure. I don't know if I mentioned Microsoft Azure previously, um, but I'll go ahead and answer. So we are partnered with Microsoft, and we have our entire PASconcept system on Microsoft's Azure platform. This is a cloud computing platform. This is essentially saying this is where our database is located. It is Microsoft's own servers. There are three big names in this field, and we've chosen to go with Microsoft because they were the ones that provided the strongest guarantee to not just the production of the data, but the validity of the data, the delivery of that data. Some of the advantages that we have by partnering with Microsoft is geo-replication. Our primary servers are located on the East Coast. If by chance there is some type of disruption, be that electrical, physical, what have you, we have a clone essentially of the same database, the same server on the West Coast. And all of PASconcept switches from one to the other in an instant. Users wouldn't even feel the impact of that change. This also means that everything is kept in duplicate in one location and subsequently in the other. I hope that helps. I hope that helps. Um, if it helps at all, if you are still confused as to what cloud computing is basically where the servers are in a location different to your physical location. Essentially, it just means a remote server, if you will, but that are accessible through the web, and that's how we're able to distribute PASconcept to everyone who uses it across the nation. Perfect. It's a great question. Great question. And if you'd ever like to know further as to how you can maximize or take advantage of your already existing PASconcept instance, by all means, always reach out. We're constantly adding new things. We also have our updates area inside our resources element. So you can always go to PASconcept updates and see what we've added and what things we have in store. But really, one of the things I'd also like to bring up is one of the key elements that allows PASconcept to be as dynamic and powerful as it is our user base. Over the course of, gosh, basically since it started, 100% of the elements that have been added to PASconcept have been at the behest or request of our users. Users will identify something that would make their lives easier, and we'll have a conversation about it. And if it makes sense to include it en masse to everyone, we'll happily include that as an element in PASconcept. We feel um, it's kind of silly to just consider the theoretical, but rather always to take full advantage of those voices that are coming from the actual industry, those people that are faced with these screens every single day, that are faced with these issues every single day. So yeah, well, perfect. Well, guys, it is currently 2:40, so we are just a little over. I thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today. Sorry about extending just a little more than we had anticipated. Um, Now, with that said, again, let me go ahead and hop over to the screen once more. If you have any questions, any concerns, any comments, anything that I could be of service with, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or to Paula, who I believe was sending the confirmation emails previously to this, so you should have her email address as well. We're always here to help. If you'd like to see how PASconcept can best suit your company, please reach out and we'd love to have a demo with you. Thank you so much, and you guys have a great day. Enjoy.